And for that to happen, there is no doubt that it has to be a whole of society. It cannot just be FAO or WFP or Ministry of Agriculture or someone. It has to be a whole of society effort. We need the collaboration with other international organizations, both within and outside the UN system, the private sector, academia, and the civil society as a whole. Creating an environment enabling women and girls to be involved in decision-making roles is essential to achieving efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food system for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life leaving no one behind. At FAO, we also welcome the celebration of the International Year of the Women Farmer in 2026, which spotlights the vital role that women farmers worldwide play in agri-food systems and their contribution to food security, nutrition, and poverty eradication. And this is most needed, I would say. Indeed, as emphasized by the FAO publication on the status of women in agri-food system, 39% of the global agricultural labor force is made up of women. Unfortunately, women encounter significant discrimination and challenges in land and livestock ownership, access to quality and secure jobs, equitable pay. For example, for every $1 that a man earns in agriculture, a woman earns only 82 cents. Also challenges in terms of participation in decision-making process and access to credit and financial services. On top of that, women are more likely to be employed in vulnerable and precarious forms of work, particularly within the agri-food system. Globally, 20.4% of young people are neither in employment, education, nor training, with young women twice as likely to fall into this category as young men. Yet, I think what we need to also keep in mind is that empowering rural women through decent work unlocks their untapped potential and brings significant social and economic benefits for women, their families, communities, rural economy, and I would say the whole society. As we reflect on these statistics and examples, it is vital to understand the interlinkages between the work that FAO does to achieve zero hunger, SDG 2, and the work towards achieving SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and SDG 5 on gender equality. In today's Thematic Youth Assembly, we will hear from various technical experts, young scientists, young farmers, and leaders who are paving the way for exploring strategies to promote decent rural employment opportunities for women and girls. They will emphasize the importance of accessing resources, education, training, innovation, technology, land, and other assets. Additionally, we will learn from all of you participating and sharing your ideas, thoughts, and insights. We hope we can keep an open mind and practice the art of listening to one another, which is not always easy, but it can happen. There is no one-size-fits-all action, but by working together, we can develop and create solutions that will lead towards actionable steps in supporting women and girls in decent rural employment. At the heart of the World Food Forum Global Youth Action Initiative is the belief that young people are not just tomorrow leaders, they are also today's change makers. And I repeat, that young people are not just tomorrow leaders, they are also today's change makers. Very important. You are the innovators, activists, and thinkers shaping the future of food, agriculture, and rural development. This platform is your platform. It's for you to share your ideas, projects, passion for creating a better world and closing the gender gap in agri-food system. Today, as we kick off the new year and still celebrating the lunar New Year, while also preparing for the year of FAO 80th anniversary celebration, we must not only recognize the progress we have made, but we must be fully aware of the challenge ahead and act on that. As we embark on this journey together, let's remember that the solutions we seek will not come from any one individual or organization. They will come from all of us. As I said, all of society effort, working in partnership across borders and sectors, united by a common purpose. Now, it's my great pleasure to hand it back to our moderator, WFF Youth Policy Board member, Marilena Bergmeijer. And we thank you again for your engagement, and I look forward to really a fruitful conversation and a lot of great ideas coming forward. So thank you very much. Wish you a great meeting, and I hand the floor back to Marilena.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for your words and for setting the stage for this important discussion today. And also a big thanks to Danny for opening the session and to highlight the intersections of youth, gender equity, and sustainable employment. And also, again, a warm welcome from my side to everyone joining us in the room today, and also for the over 180 people joining us online. The number is still growing as we go on. And I have the pleasure today to moderate our panel discussion, where we explore not only challenges, but also the solutions for promoting decent rural employment for women and youth in agri-food systems. And we have an excellent lineup of experts here with us. Let me introduce to you Chiara Couture, who's a professional officer in youth employment and promotion from the ILO, joining us online. Then we have Omnia Riz, sitting next to me here, who is a gender officer at FAO. Then also here in the room with us, we have Celia Bühler from WIPAD, who's the country representative for Switzerland. And last but not least, we also have joining us online, Eric Andrew, who is a young trade leader with WTO. And let's start right with you, Chiara, and dive in. As an expert for youth employment, could you elaborate on the intersectional challenges young women face with respect to youth in general in accessing decent rural employment and agri-food systems and the related ILO priorities?
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marilyn, and really thank you to the WFF team. And I'm very proud to be here today and joining this exciting discussion. As the director said, this is it's very nice to host this discussion in Geneva. Although I'm sorry not to be here physically with you, I'm very happy to join and to kick off the discussion of this interesting panel, colleagues. So indeed, I'm here on behalf of the ILO, the International Labour Organization. I am an expert on youth employment, specifically in rural areas. And also, I mean, I appreciate the question on the main, challenges and contextual factors that are affecting rural employment, specifically for young women. If you would allow me, I have a short video that maybe can help set the scene, also try to bring and complement the intervention made by the director by providing some key figures and statistics on where we are in terms of rural employment. So please let me know if you can, if you have the sound in the room.
Yes.
Globally, 1.2 billion young people, many residing in rural areas, are set to shape the future of agriculture and rural economies. Yet, they face significant hurdles in securing decent employment. The ability of rural youth to achieve successful transitions depends on the interrelation of multiple factors at various levels: individual, household, community, and structural level. Their journey towards economic empowerment is further burdened by structural deficiencies in rural areas and the impact of global trends transforming the world of work. Young people are exposed to working poverty in agriculture and rural informality. Many of them are NEETs and lack of voice and awareness about their rights. Despite these obstacles, rural youth are a potent force for innovation and transformation. They can play a catalytic role in the transition to green and digital economies, revitalizing rural economies, and boosting the agri-food sector with new technologies and sustainable practices to feed the growing world's population. Therefore, policy action is needed to address the significant untapped potential of this sizable and growing demographic through decent work, while fostering rural economic sector's competitiveness and the vitality of rural areas and contributing to advancing social justice for all. To harness this untapped potential, a coordinated approach through social dialogue is crucial. This includes strategies that are gender-sensitive as well as rights-based. Effective solutions will put forward pathways for change that combine labor demand and supply-side measures, as well as labor market matching. This involves promoting interventions that will boost the creation of decent jobs for rural youth, as well as those aiming at improving the job quality and supporting labor transitions. The ILO has a long-standing commitment to promote decent work for youth in rural areas. Building on its comparative advantage, ILO leads and coordinates impactful efforts to create employment, ensuring that their rights at work are respected, that they have access to social protection, and that they take part in social dialogue. Projects such as ProAgro Youth, Joy, and Job Agri exemplify how the ILO and its partners effectively implement strategies that secure pathways for a just transition for rural youth, showcasing its capacity to lead and coordinate impactful employment promotion efforts. Given the scale of the challenge, it is key to pursue strong partnerships and collaborations between agencies and relevant stakeholders, such as the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth and the Global Donor Platform on Rural Development. Join us in elevating the potential of rural youth. Discover more about our initiatives and how you can contribute to boosting decent jobs for rural youth for the sustainable transformation of rural economies. Visit our website and get involved.
All right, thank you for your attention. Indeed, the key message here is really untapping the potential of rural youth. I also want to be considerate of the time here and allow other colleagues and panelists to join the discussion. So just quickly, just a recap on key messages that I would like to share with you today for the sake of this discussion, is that even though agriculture remains the primary source of employment in many regions, especially in Africa and Asia and the Pacific, we still have like a growing employment in non-farm sectors that are gaining relevance. Indeed, our latest statistics say that 40% of rural youth employment in Latin America, for instance, is in non-farm sectors. So this is really also a moment where we need to also think beyond the rural economy as we used to look at in the past decades, and really try to understand what are the new drivers of success and employment growth, such as, for example, tourism, aquaculture, and forestry, for instance. Now, among the rural areas, youth, especially those aged 15 to 35, make almost up half of the agriculture workforce. So really is like, you know, almost the majority of people working and living in rural areas are youth. And of those, I mean, more than 50% work on the agri-food sector. So here we can definitely see a high potential to explore and to untap in our intervention and actions. However, just very briefly, and most of you are also aware, but latest statistics shows that rural youth, especially rural women, are experiencing working poverty and a widespread informality. Indeed, 1 in 3 agricultural workers in the formal economy work in agriculture. And if we think specifically about women, that is the topic of today's discussion, see that they are overrepresented, especially as own account workers and contributing family workers. So very specific jobs and working profiles that we definitely need to take into account when we want to tackle the employment challenges in rural areas. Now, the director correctly mentioned the youth not in employment nor in education or training, the so-called NEET, are still widespreading globally. Indeed, our latest statistics from the Get Youth Report 2024 say that 20.4% of global youth are NEET, so not in employment nor education or training. And out of those 256 million of youth globally, 171 million, for instance, 28% are women. Compared, you can see here, compared to 85 million young men. So here, the gender gap is already evident by simply looking at the statistics. Young women, and in particular so in South Asia, that is an area of concern, is growing to 42.4%. So we need really to understand what is preventing young women to access educational opportunities and also employment. Speaking about needs, it was even more so if we look specifically on rural areas. So the needs rate are higher when we compared urban versus rural youth. And as you can see from the graph on the left-hand side, the gender gap is even more evident when we look at rural areas only. So there are two main categories of need here. We have to need to look at the personal circumstances that are behind as a driver of these barrier, but also look at the labor demand side of this phenomenon, and particularly look at the lack of available jobs or education opportunities for youth in general and for young women specifically. So we already touched very briefly some of the key indicators, economic indicators that are affecting youth, but we already noticed that when we look and break down by gender, we see that there is some specific challenges and barriers that are affecting youth as a group, but young women specifically, especially rural young women. So what are those barriers? What are these specific challenges, gender barriers that are facing rural young women? Definitely something is cross-cutting of what we say being rural. And in these we mention, for example, the lack of resources, the lack of productive inputs, but also, for example, a lack of infrastructures of any kind. But in addition to that, rural young women, they're also subject to cultural and social norms that are preventing them to access education or employment. They are victims of gender stereotypes, or in some cases, gender violence or domestic violence. And most of all, in some cases, and as I showed earlier, they mostly engage in unpaid care work and in informality, making policymakers and decision makers more difficult to tackle the specific group of young women. So what is the ILO approach? I was asked to show what is the ILO approach to promote decent work in rural economies. We already mentioned this in the video, but it is clear that this is not a typical situation where one size fits all. There are so many dimensions, multiple determinants that are affecting the transition of young people from education to employment, but to decent employment speaking. So we need to take into account all those barriers. The impact of mega trends, for example, like the climate change, or for example, some other rural context level, like sectoral activities or sectoral growth in agri-food or aquaculture, as I mentioned earlier. So there are many ways where, as organization, as UN, but also as practitioners, we can tackle the problem and make our contribution to untap the potential of rural youth. What we do at the ILO level is to work on an integrated and coordinated approach. For instance, links the labor supply, the labor demand, but also working on the labor transition and intermediation. in order to tackle all those barriers and challenges at once in an holistic way. But we have three main pillars that we always take into consideration when we work on rural areas, and those are gender responsive policies, right-based, and focus on social dialogue. Those are three main things that can really ensure the transition is gender responsive, that is fully embracing all the rights at work, the voices of young people that are conveyed through social dialogue. So the coordinated approach is preferred to a standalone measures that are very useful on the spot, on very specific problems and solutions. But as I said, whenever we look at the whole labor market, labor demand, labor supply, labor intermediation, this is where when we can really promote sustainable change, sustainable and impactful change in the life of rural youth by working on the creation of decent jobs for rural youth. So this is more working in making the rural areas more productive again, let them grow and creating more decent jobs opportunity, but also improving the quality of those jobs for rural people by working on labor conditions, labor rights, through social dialogue. And finally, as I said, supporting the labor transition of rural youth, not just from education to employment, but also from what we call under unemployment to more sustainable and decent employment as they grow old. So here, very briefly, these are some examples on specific activities that we can integrate as part of this broader framework. Definitely, skills development is a key point to empower young women specifically. Working closely with policymakers and institutions to embed on-the-job training measures, for example, but also try to work deeply across knowledge development, capacity building, but also direct support, and finally, as was recalled in the video, partnership and policy coherence. I'm very proud to be here together with FAO and WFF, really to show that by working together, we can do more, and we can do better. If you are eager to learn more about our work, I invite you to join our website. Decent Jobs for Youth is the global initiative, a multi-stakeholder initiative that englobe partners such as FAO, the ILO, and other UN agencies, along with private sectors and government, but also youth organizations. Yeah, I also put here a QR code to download the latest policy brief that we have developed in collaboration with IFAD, the International Fund of Agricultural Development. So thank you for your attention, and the floor is back to the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chiara, for setting the scene with your presentation and also showing us the intersectional challenges young women face, and also ILO's priorities in tackling these issues. Chiara already touched on it a bit, but let's shift our focus to the more systemic factors contributing to women's vulnerability in agri-food systems. So over to you, Omnia. Despite women's critical role in agriculture, also the importance of agri-food systems for women's livelihood and the welfare of their families, they often face worse working conditions and marginalization. Can you walk us through the root causes of this challenge?
Of course, thank you so much for the question. And let me first start by thanking, of course, the World Forum team for pulling this together, and for FAO Liaison office in Geneva for hosting us today. And I think, as you said, Chiara has already set the scene with some of the factors. And Dominique also spoke of it a little bit, where he mentioned that it is true that women, especially rural women, rely heavily on natural resources for their livelihoods. And even beyond their functional roles as food producers, food processors, farmers, and entrepreneurs, they also hold extensive knowledge about the local ecosystem. And in fact, this knowledge is not just important for the immediate well-being of their families, it's also important for us all for the sustainability of the environment. And despite this, they still face a lot of systemic challenges and inequalities. And Dominique spoke also about the limited access to land, to social protection, to services, to innovation and technology. But rural women also face wage disparities in every sector in agriculture. And as stated in the Status of Women in Agriculture System report of 2023, we saw that for every dollar a man makes, women make 82 cents, which is already a reflection of the inequalities that exist in the agriculture system. But Marilena, you asked about the root causes, and the sad reality is that there isn't a single cause. It's basically a web of interconnected factors. But at the heart of that web is actually social norms, which also Chiara mentioned. Social norms affect women and girls, especially in rural areas. They affect their freedom of choice, their freedom of mobility, and they also define what is an acceptable job a woman can make, often confining them to the most vulnerable and the least stable jobs. So as a result, they tend to be more or overrepresented in informal jobs, in the insecure jobs in the agricultural systems. They are the ones who are left behind working under very harsh conditions, with no access to social protection, and they are more subjected to greater exposure to economic risks. Additionally, social norms also define how male extension workers could or not engage with farmers. So in some societies, women do not receive any trainings because of the disproportionate burden inside the household, but also because the norms dictate that they cannot receive trainings from men. And of course, we cannot ignore the fact that women and girls are disproportionately affected by climate change, and these issues might even add on the burden of work inside the household. So they miss on the opportunities to attend schools or to finish their education. And in some rural areas, girls could be even more subjected to risks by being introduced to the labor market or even unpaid labor very early, or they get married off at an earlier stage where they would not be able to finish their schooling. Finally, I want to say that discriminatory social norms do not just affect women's ability to access jobs, but they even put them at risks when and if they find job opportunities. This is because we see that gender-based violence and sexual harassment is very predominant in all the spaces. It's in the workspace, it's in the public spaces, it's in the transportation, and also it is in our households. So the studies have also shown that the agriculture settings have high rates of sexual harassment, and this is because agriculture activities take place in the isolated areas, where women do not have access to legal protection or GBV services, and might even fear social stigma, which is again defined by social norms. And especially when we're talking about the non-standard working conditions. So here we're talking about ones who are working in informal jobs or seasonal works. This is an excellent environment, an ideal environment for the predator to carry out sexual harassment or abusing women, and especially the younger ones, knowing that they will fear reporting the incident because they are not covered by protection, and because they will fear that stigma that we talked about, and also because they have no other options. So if they fear, if they actually lose that job, they will not be able to find another. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this analysis. It's definitely important to have the root cause of the jealousy in mind when addressing and trying to change something. And you mentioned innovation and technology. So how do you think can these approaches empower rural women in agricultural systems and improve their working conditions? And how can these be scaled up?
Thank you so much. So far, a growing body of evidence proves that innovation and technology can help women so much by improving their market access, their access to information, access to training opportunities, and also boosting their productivity. However, we have to start from a recognition that innovation and technology are not gender neutral. They tend to mirror the same power dynamics that exist within the institutions that come up with such solutions. So if we are working in a research center that is male-dominated, more often than not, women come up with a solution that only works for men or the ones that we know about. And this is the unconscious bias that everyone knows about. So from here, I think we can agree that helping women with innovation and technology does not start or end by just distributing tools. First, we need to ensure that rural women are active participants in the scientific research that comes up with the solutions. They are the ones who that we need their feedback. They are farmers, knowledge holders, they are entrepreneurs. And we need to understand that just as we have knowledge they don't have, they also have knowledge we don't have. Secondly, I think innovation have to aim to reduce the physical workloads that rural women have, which is definitely contributing to their harsh working conditions. So introducing labor-saving technologies or climate resilient crops could help women so much, but we need to ensure that these innovative solutions are culturally appropriate and contextually relevant. And yes, innovation in that manner can help women so much in accessing decent working conditions, but we need to put in our consideration also that such solutions has to be accompanied by other interventions that uphold decent rural employment. Factors like social protection, fair wages, protection from sexual harassment, maternity benefits, and so on. We also need to ensure that with our innovation and technology, we tackle and address the systemic and structural inequalities that women face. So, for example, we have the digital gap in the agri-food system or in the rural areas. Innovation and technology can help women. For example, accessing training opportunities online or getting market access, better market information, or better climate information to adjust their crops and so on. But we cannot just do this and stop here. We need to accompany this with a lot of digital training and digital literacy sessions for women, and making sure that we reach the ones who are further behind, and making sure that young women are safe using the internet, because it is very unsafe over there. And we need to ensure that they are protected from harassment on the internet. Now, lastly, I want to say that innovation isn't limited to digital or mechanical solutions. I think we all know that innovation could mean that we do things differently. So speaking of the bioeconomy sector, we will talk about later in the breakout group, we saw that a lot of good opportunities emerged from simply shifting our focus on the food waste to turn it into resources, like productive resources. So in the fisheries sector, for example, we saw that roughly every year we have 38,000 tons of the fish skin that gets discarded at a global level. By turning that fish skin into leather that you could wear into fashion through some innovative tools and innovative solution that is actually building on local and indigenous knowledge in the field, we have opened up a lot of good economic opportunities for women. And not just here, but we also contributed to the sustainability of the environment. We have came up with green job opportunities, and we fostered economic and community engagement. Lastly, I want to talk about the scale-up recipe, which I think also Chiara talked a bit about it. First of all, we need a lot of capacity building initiatives to help women, and especially the young ones, to access trainings and business skills and also leadership skills. But we need to ensure that the financial mechanisms are also focusing on women and targeting them through blended loans and low interest finance support systems, so that they can invest and grow and have actually confidence in taking on the new innovative techniques. We need a lot of policy integration, because so much we can do is on the community and the grassroots level, but if our successful approaches are not taken up by the national level or the government, we are not really going to do so much as we hope to. Lastly, I think what works like magic with women is the networking and knowledge sharing platforms. Especially when we're talking about rural women, they tend to not have trust in the system. So the best you can do is actually ensure that they come together, because they trust each other, even if they don't know each other. So such platforms can help women so much in uptaking good innovative solutions that worked in other areas, and they know how to adjust it to fit their context. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much for your input, for some concrete, innovative, and also how they can be scaled up. And now let's find out how young professionals are supported in the space. Celia, YPART is actively helping young women to enter and thrive in agricultural system. Could you share more about how your organization facilitates access to decent rural employment and builds career pathways? Are there, for example, like tailored capacity strengthening activities that also Omnia talked about? And looking at the time, please stick to your most important points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilena and Omnia and Clara. Before I took some note, and I'm really happy to see that the points I have also aligned with what you just said, and I think we can build on that and other inputs. So, as you mentioned, YPART stands for Young Professionals for Agriculture and Rural Development, and YPART has been around for now almost 20 years. And just on a personal note, one of the founders is now one of my colleagues. So we have really this kind of next generation. We're still there. One generation later, it all started because they noticed we still have so much space and say in the influence spheres. And I mean, 20 years later, we're still there, but I'm super happy and glad to see that now we have such platforms, such as the World Food Forum as well, to leverage those initiatives and connect even broader. And now we have more than 50 country representatives, and I have the chance to be one of them for Switzerland. And as we all know, and as you mentioned as well, or Chiara, that we have no one-fits-all solution. I think the challenges related to use have to be really context-specific to be efficient. And for that, you really need to reach out to the young professionals who know their context very well, who knows their challenges, but also the levels of action, as you mentioned, all the social norms that are big barriers. And those young change makers leaders also need support in order to bring back to their community, that they're really willing to. They need some support and tools. And this network you mentioned, this network that is giving us so much energy and confidence in stepping for others. So at YPART, we have those 3 pillars that are advocacy, capacity building, and networking. And so as a network, as I've mentioned, we provide tools to our country representatives. But here I would also like to highlight a few examples from my colleagues. So one from Jenny Seching in Kenya. She's really a strong female leader. And last December, for example, they set up a community cafe where they invited female farmers to come and to present actually their products and what they do. And at the same time, they invited female experts on the question of social justice, gender equality, violence. And she said it was so empowering to see that actually the female farmers or rural women, they were so happy also to once have access to the experts, to sit with them at the table, that you can actually translate those big issues that we're talking now at this table in more understandable and digestible terms. Because they need also to relate to this in a different forms. And I think that's where the fact that meeting and being together in presence can make such a difference. So such initiative, as YPART Kenya put into this, really had a big impact, as well as connecting women who have gained experience and are now established with other women who need women support. And again, I think it relates very well with what you've said. It's something that YPART Kenya has been doing. But we talk a lot about women and female leaders, but we also need the men in this journey. And I think there we can bring in Eden from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where YPART is actually implementing a project funded by the Urgent Action Fund and AFP, where they really focus on educational training for young women. And they started by asking them, what do you need? What would you like to learn? And co-design really the project and the approach. And he told me that one of these is important to address really what they need, but also to then better approach the men in the community, so that it's really a journey together and that we can effectively address the various social norms.
Thank you so much for sharing the insights of the amazing work YPART is doing, and also for stressing the role of men in the sky, which is, I think, also really important. And to give our audience maybe some more also practical steps they can take out of this discussion. What role can youth play in advocating for decent rural employment for women and girls? Could you share some more good practices from the advocacy journey of YPART?
Yes, sure. So I think the first role I see, and for me, it's also that youth can really keep things to the ground, keep things concrete, because I think as young people, we are always quite strongly linked to our own community, and we can really report back from things we are concerned by or are close relatives or council by. So I think keeping things concrete to the ground, and really, if we take the network of WIPOD, but also the work the forum in overall, we like an octopus a bit, and we have arms here and there, and then we can really quickly reach out to someone to get specific inputs and bring it upwards. But I think it's not only the advocacy to bring consent from the community to the power circles in a way, it's also making things from above understandable in the communities. So it really is both directions. And I think their use can really work as translators, both from on the ground practical concerns, but also from higher level concept. And sometimes there, I think we have to learn navigating those spaces. Sometimes we have to kick doors, and sometimes we have to build bridges. And I think, like, if I take the example again of Janice, she really had to fight to get a seat at the table of the technical council of the Somo County, because they're developing a new policy on food systems. And now she's at the table, and she can really contribute. And on my side in Switzerland, it's maybe different. I think if I would come in and kick doors, I would not really be on the scene. So I maybe have to move a bit differently, but I also had to learn this. And I think my role in Switzerland is maybe more to connect the dots, for example, because we have a lot going on for young people in agri-food systems, rural areas. But then maybe I've just seen this last October that I have colleagues in this room I've never had before going to the World Food Forum, and we're all from Switzerland, and we all work on different topics, whether it's the UN, the academia, or young farmers. So here I see the role of youth by connecting the dots at our level, and then maybe bring in our more established colleagues. And so I was very pleased to hear Dominique Bergeron saying that we need to practice the art of listening, because I think it goes in both ways. And I'm very happy to have the seniors also listening to us, because I think in the whole journey we need allies, and whether it's men or between the generation, youth can really bring in this kind of fresh new perspective, sometimes shake the tree, and sometimes learn how to navigate the established system.
Thank you so much. That's very inspiring and awesome. Yeah, stressing again the importance of intergenerational conversations and working together. I really like the image of advocacy as an octopus that will stay in my head. And now let's zoom out to a more global perspective. Over to you, Eric, joining us online. Trade policies are crucial, play a crucial role in shaping employment opportunities. From your perspective, how can trade policy be leveraged to promote decent rural employment for women and girls?
Thank you, Chiara, Omnia, and Celia for excellent points. I would like to start by saying that 8 billion lives and every mouth needs to be fed. And even in the fast-evolving world of AI, in my opinion, 3 basic things remain the most important material needs of man, which is food, clothing, and shelter, and agriculture really is the answer to all of this. In many parts of the world, women remain the backbone of agricultural development. Yet there are a lot of systemic barriers that we have actually listened to. But then I would actually like to work on a bit of African statistics. Women contribute 70% to the informal cost and 40% of small and medium enterprises in Africa. And countries like South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Ethiopia, women entrepreneurs are crucial contributors. But then some of the systemic barriers we see is like the one mentioned by Omnia, where the guy earns $1 while the lady earns 87 for Africa. So we have a lot of challenges, right? We have challenges in the place of access to resources. We have challenges in the place of informality in the sector that women are actually most engaged in. And then we also have the education and skill gaps that everyone has been talking about. But then we will not deny that over the years, there's actually been some progress. Because when you look at the WTO's annual report in 2024, it really highlights how the Buenos Aires Declaration on Women and Trade has led to better financing and access for women entrepreneurs. We can see rising potential of the Africa EFCFTA in unlocking new job opportunities, and we can see the ITC's initiative training over 3 million women. But then with this progress, how then can trade policies support decent employment for women and rural areas? Well, I would like to give a bit of recommendation, but I would actually like to also see for whom, because many a times we see recommendations in this space with nobody to belt the cat, and so we have a lot of papers. And so the first thing I really want to talk about is the expand of trade financing for women-led agribusinesses, because when you talk about promoting decent rural employment for women, okay. Hi, Marilena. I just saw a comment that you cannot hear me. Can you hear me?
Do you maybe have a microphone, like earplugs with a microphone next to you? I think the sound's not the best, but otherwise we can hear you well enough, I think. Thank you.
Is it better now?
Can you say something?
Hello, can you hear me?
It's worse.
Actually, it's better without the earplugs, but thank you. We can understand you.
Oh. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's good. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I think I should just stick without the airport. And so one of the things I want to talk about is the expand of trade financing for women-led agribusinesses, because the entire value chain from production to consumption, trade, it's actually trade dependent. And so if we really want to see more women engaged in trade and more women more employed in the agri sector, the access to finance cannot be overemphasized. And that is why I want to make one of the recommendations as a call for multilateral organizations like the WTO and also the World Bank to work with national governments to provide financing schemes that target women-led agribusinesses. But then this should actually target, this should actually cover low-interest loans and microfinance opportunities that do not require collateral, because one of the things that we see in this part of the world is that women a lot of times do not have collateral to take finances. And then we actually also want to talk about formalization of the sector. And then for places like Africa, this cannot happen without enhancing education and digital inclusion. And that is why one of the calls really would have to be for governments and organizations to enhance the digital literacy for rural women, enabling them to participate in e-commerce platforms and digital trades. Training programs will be tailored to women's needs, and it should cover topics like online marketing, mobile banking, and e-commerce for agricultural goods. And then we can actually also work towards stricter implementation of platforms and initiatives like the WTO's Trade and Gender Policy Framework. When we see more countries and more nationals adopting and implementing, this actually helps a lot, and we'll see that this will trickle down. And then we must remove discriminatory barriers to women's land ownership and access to credit. When you come to Nigeria, a lot of smallholder farmers contribute to the food that we eat. A lot of women also contribute to agriculture, but very little women actually own their own lands. And so this discriminatory barrier of women owning lands must actually be solved. And that actually has to do with governments of countries. And we also have to emphasize gender-responsive supply chain, where the governments and projects should encourage private sector firms to source some of their raw materials for women-led farms, so that we can encourage women to actually adopt that farm-firm approach, where even them are no longer looking for employment, but are also employers of labor. And multilateral organizations can actually also help in that through the creation of framework and guidelines that can help women's participation in global supply chains, and also promoting fair wage policies to ensure equal pay for men and women. So one of the things that must really continue to be advocated for is that pay parity, where same work hours should actually give same pay, as even in informal sectors. But then we can see there's a lot of progress in the international space in discussions, but if most of these things do not trickle down to grassroots, the growth will continue to be impeded. And that is why for everything that that is done, especially in conversations like this, the recommendations as they move from the multilateral organizations to governments, to nationals, to local organizations, we must encourage that they are actually trickled down even to the grassroots communities. So that these things and these recommendations can be implemented and women can actually have access and solve some of the systemic barriers that actually stop their access. So in a nutshell, really, it is production that enhances trade and enables trade. But without production, there is no trade. And so if women cannot produce, they cannot trade. And all of the factors that support women to produce must be there if we want women to trade. So accessibility should actually be one of the key things that we look at. And so I don't know if you can still hear me, Marilena.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, because I can faintly hear you, but I can.
Can you hear us? Now we can't. No. We can't hear you anymore. Now you're muted. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you again.
Okay, all right, awesome. Those are some of the points I would like to mention for now on how we can promote decent employment for rural women and for.
Thank you so much. And to wrap up the session, can you maybe state 2 short points on how you can effectively advocate for education and skills development and trade to promote access to decent jobs and agri-food systems for women and girls?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. So first of all, I would really want to make this snappy. We've seen growth in terms of youth involvement in international deliberations, and now the youth have a seat at the table. But one of the first things I want to say is that having a seat at the table is not enough as a young person. So your voice must be heard. Your voice must be heard. And then we've seen a lot of people set up. Sorry, can you not hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, awesome. So we've seen a lot of organizations set up youth policy board, youth advisory boards to listen to young people. But then I often like to ask the question, how much of youth recommendations are actually incorporated in decision making? We must ensure that these youth programs and the youth voices are not just statistics or KPIs that we've listened to young people. Thankfully, the WFF actually has a youth policy board. And some of the ways we can actually look at is sometimes the financing that is allocated for programs like this. And even from the budgetary allocation, we can see, okay, fine, do we really value the recommendations that are coming from these people? Because it is only the person that has a voice that actually can speak for the voiceless. And so some of the ways, now quickly, you've asked me to give 2 points. As a young person, some of the things that we have done in Nigeria that every young person can actually also do is to lobby for policies that integrate gender inclusivity in education and skills development within the agri-food system. This includes pushing for curriculum changes, scholarships, and funding for women to access trade and climate education. For example, some of the things we are actually trying to do right now is to ensure fair and equal gender budgeting in terms of climate smart agriculture for women in rural areas in northern Nigeria. And also, another thing that you can do really is to push for investment in technology and innovation that makes it easier for rural women to access trade education, skills and development. I think that is actually also a very important point that must be done. But then also, one of the things I want to say is that young people are sometimes the first the first intercept to most of this technology, the first intercept to most of opportunities that come. And so as young people, one of the things young people should also try to do is that as you're advocating and you're pushing, when the results come, you should actually also be that point of access that takes it down to rural communities, that takes it down to women. Because if it exists at that stage, but it has not actually gotten to them, there is still a gap. And that is one of the big issues we are facing in the agri sector, where it exists there, but it hasn't actually gotten there. And also, we cannot overemphasize the role of social media. Social media is actually very big because young people are policy influencers. They are not policy formulators most of the time. But then you see even the people that formulate these policies, they are either on social media or they have children on social media. So one of the things that young people cannot stop doing is really to look for platform-specific engagement models that would actually be able to promote the voices of women and young people in accessing some of these technologies and developments that are needed so that we have an equitable and fair agri-food system. And so thank you very much. That is, sorry if I gave more than two, but that is it for now. Thank you, Marilena.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was very insightful. And with that, we will wrap up our panel discussion. Thank you for all the speakers and the panelists. And luckily, we will get to hear more from our experts in the next session. I will, looking at the time, very quickly introduce what we are planning to do next. So we're gonna split up into breakout groups. We will have 4 breakout groups, 2 online and 2 here in the room. And each group will be supported by a technical expert and a YPD facilitator. And we have different topics to discuss in the group. And the objective of this group is to prepare around 4 to 6 use statements that are specific to the topic of each group. And there should be 2 types of statements, like the first one, statements that identify the main issues at stake, for example, identify the synergies and linkages between the SDGs. And the second statement should find like potential policy areas to intervene or concrete actions to take. And please be as specific as possible. The facilitators will have some examples with you to share. And yeah, I will stop explaining here that we have more time to discuss together. So enjoy your discussion and really take this opportunity, and we will gather all the inputs from you in the groups, and then we also continue to gather inputs from you online throughout the year and the next steps we're gonna do. So thank you so much, and let's start the groups.
So welcome back to everyone online, and thank you so much for your contributions in the breakout sessions. I'll now ask each of the online facilitators to please provide a short summary of their discussions and key findings. Would anyone like to volunteer to go first online? I believe the other 2 groups, we have Clara and maybe Danny as well.
Hi, so I can start. Danny has to leave, so in our breakout group, we discussed a lot about how important it is the policy discussion and the leadership opportunities for rural women, how important, of course, is the education and training, and how in this type of initiatives we should be able to give them a voice. And then just to wrap up very quickly, encourage women to work together and support continuity in government programs was very important and was also very discussed. We also have had a lot of people giving us some strategies and some success stories that they had in their own communities. And I think that was it. It was a bit short, but we discussed a lot and it was very, thank you, Michaela.
Thank you, Clara. Is there any other group online that would like to share a short summary?
Yep, Ozinor is presenting.
Ozinor, can you hear us? Would you like to present your breakout group?
Otherwise, Ravi can do it.
Otherwise, if you can't hear it, Ravi, can you present the outcomes?
So we discussed about the main issue of challenges of the women. So we got the statement like a main issue of unemployment within women in rural areas or from a rural backgrounds in different forms like societal pressure, patriarchal norms, especially for the youth, the stereotype that women have to keep the family together and have no time for business outside of the contribute largely to why so many government bodies or initiatives overlook this issue and have little to no regard for education and training among young women. This including the already isolated culture of rural areas where internet connection and financial aid is sparse. Further worsens the issue of women's rural unemployment. Societal norms carry the belief that people from these underdeveloped environments, such as immigrants, gain low quality education and have no relevant skills in today's market, which lessen the opportunity of unemployment for these individuals. Especially the young women face unique issues in an intersectional way, including the status of widowhood resulting from child or early marriages. Being widow is a challenge to get access to decent rural employment as they are burdened with harmful societal and cultural practices as they are perceived as impure. Since there are child marriages, there will be also the child widows. That is to say the girls are even more excluded from all area of societal, including decent rural employments. And other view we got that varying status of immigration are also variable to take into account and limit women and girls to participate in the formal agricultural economy and job market. If an irregular immigration status is already a challenge for us, it's disproportionately affect the women as face they intersect various discrimination. So we got a lots of views, lots of thoughts on our breakout room, and it was really insightful for us. And thank you everyone who contributed with their thoughts with that. And that's all, Marilena.
Thank you so much, Ravi.
And I'll now pass to in the room, Marlena, if you would like to start.
Yes, thank you so much, Michaela. So the first group here in person, understanding the role of young women's education and accessing decent jobs. Who would like to present here?
There's different people presenting. Yeah. Maybe I can start and then you do like
that was the other group. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I hope you can hear me well. So we looked at education and training for women and girls in decent rural employment. We had a wonderful conversation. The first looking at the challenges. So we found that if we're to address economic empowerment for women, we have to look at all of the different areas for access, be that financial, to materials, to resources, geographical, or structural issues within the education system. It's also important to account for cultural biases and local realities. In terms of actions to be taken, we'll keep it brief because, as we know, it's only the start of a very long process. Education and training should be both culturally sensitive and gender sensitive. It's important to use accessible language, both offering in local languages and terminology that the women and girls understand, and also to recognize existing expertise and leadership, including of Indigenous peoples. And overall, maybe one final point to mention, which I think resonated with our group, was the importance of breaking social norms through also having education and training for men and boys, in addition to women and girls, and how better to empower and support the women and girls in their lives. So over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, David. And now the last group, our group, the one on empowering women and girls through innovation, the opportunities of bioeconomy.
Sure. So this is the start of the process. And then we will keep working on this, but we listed a few challenges, mainly two. So notably accessibility challenges linked to justice, and then climate justice. I'll be talking about accessibility challenges. So throughout our discussions, we noticed that there's a lot of barriers to justice, especially for women, but not only. So we have access to land. Our case study was focused on Tanzania. In Tanzania, we had incredible progress when it comes to women's defense cases for access and equitable access to land ownership, but I mean, there's still progress to be done. So this is one part where justice fails rural women. Then we have intellectual property rights that can be sometimes detrimental. We have case studies of seeds, so seed rights. It can be a monopoly from specific firms and big corporations, thus not allowing rural people and especially rural women to continue their activities on the ground. Labor rights as well sometimes fail. People who are working directly on their own small productions. So this is something that needs to also be taken into account. And Also, we talked about ownership monopolies, unequal bargaining power, unequal knowledge access, and unequal access to local and national, but also international policymakers, and the capacity of influencing those. It links to education, but not only, links also to bargaining, collective bargaining power, and being taken into account again due to social norms. So this is one of the challenges, and then someone will talk about climate justice.
Yes, so we also in the course of our conversation acknowledge that women are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And then, obviously amongst women, rural women, women working in the agricultural sector are disproportionately impacted, both in terms of physical safety and in terms of vulnerability of the agricultural industry to be impacted by climate change. So acknowledging that as a key challenge in terms of, building resiliency and equitability in the rural agricultural space for women.
Yeah, and then we looked at policy recommendations, and we agree that financial empowerment and inclusion is key in supporting rural women's innovation. And this is because most rural women are informal, self-employed workers. They operate without social security, employment benefits, or business protection. They have limited access to financial resources and are vulnerable to economic shocks. So financial inclusion and stabilization is absolutely not negotiable if these women will remain and continue to anchor rural economies, remain strong agents of food security and sustainability, playing a crucial role in agricultural value chain. So some of the proposed solutions under the policy recommendations includes microfinance, grant and access, obviously low interest micro loans and grants that can provide the capital necessary for stock expansion and resilience against inflation. We looked at price stabilization measures, entrepreneurial and financial training, obviously giving them the right training to have the strategies to manage their business effectively and plan to enhance economic resilience. And then finally, cooperative network and support system, which is absolutely crucial for these rural women. So women-led business cooperatives would create shared resources for bulk purchasing, emergency funds, and community-driven economic empowerment.
Thank you so much. And luckily we will be all able to share some more statements and inputs in the online form. Looking at the time, we will wrap up the session here now. And I will give over to you, back to you, Michaela.
Thank you, Marilena, and thank you everyone very, very much for your active participation and valuable contributions across it today. The discussions have provided actionable insights into empowering youth and advancing gender equity for the increased rural employment opportunities. It's been really wonderful to see the evolution of this assembly from concept to execution here today. So before we close, I'd like to take the opportunity to share a few takeaway messages. It was sobering at the beginning to hear from our intergenerational panel about the current status of women and youth rural employment, but incredibly inspiring to hear about the range of initiatives and programs that are making a difference. I particularly resonated with our keynote speaker's comment highlighting the significant economic and social benefits that can come from improving rural employment. And of course, Ms. Omnia's commentary around the local and Indigenous knowledge that rural women often hold, but is not adequately realized. We also heard insights about the role of men and whole families bringing in along this journey. And of course, comments around building gender-sensitive supply chains and trade. As next steps, we'll continue these discussions during the side event at the Commission on the Status of Women in March 2025, and launch a position paper at the high-level political forum later this year. Starting in mid-February, so just in a couple of weeks, we will open an online call where everyone will be able to share their input. And this forum will be open for several months, so your input will be used to shape the youth recommendation paper. We really invite you all to take the opportunity to contribute to this, and you'll find details about this call for inputs on the World Food Forum profile. But if you do have any questions, please reach out to Martina Borreo or David Giles from the FAO Office of Youth and Women, who are in the room with you today. You'll also find their contact details in the chat for any of our online participants. And with that, on behalf of the organizing team, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our speakers, our facilitators, and all of the participants for your engagement. Together, we can drive meaningful change in decent rural employment for women and girls. So thank you. And I'll now pass over to Mr. Kazuki Kitaoko, the Director of the Office of Youth and Women at FAO, for closing remarks. Over to you, Kazuki.
Thank you so much, Michaela. I hope you can all hear me, because we didn't do a sound check. Okay, you can hear me, fantastic. So thank you, Michaela, for a kind introduction, and to all members of the World Food Forum Youth Policy Board for your dedication and in guiding this Youth Assembly's strategic discussion today. It's a truly youth-led vision that you have been laying here as agenda on the table for further consideration in many of the governing bodies, as mentioned before. It is a really great pleasure to see this first thematic World Food Forum Youth Assembly session on supporting women and girls in decent rural employment. The first actually hosted outside of the FAO headquarters, as Dominique was saying at the very beginning, and I hope this is not going to be the last one. I think this is a really good example of how we can use the different places in the UN system for having youth discussions, truly youth-led assembly discussions, to bring some of these important aspects forward. And thanks also to the FAO Liaison Office in Geneva and the International Labour Organization for hosting this important debate today. Perhaps for some of you who are a bit new to the Youth Assembly, the Assembly is the World Food Forum central platform for the systematic and structured engagement of youth in agri-food system governance. It is truly unique, actually, in the UN system, and as you can see, it is entirely youth-led, as a space for you, for young people from around the world, young representatives from around the world, to voice your perspectives and priorities, influencing increasingly intergovernmental processes. And of course, we stand ready here to help bringing your voices to the intergovernmental processes, but the platform is entirely in your hands, in the hand of young people. And before I react on today's discussion, allow me perhaps to say a couple of words about the newly established Office of Youth and Women. We were just established a year ago here at the FAO, and it's a true testament to the importance that FAO is putting on the voice of youth and of course women in this important transformation of our agri-food systems that we will need to see if we want to achieve the development goals that have been set by our membership. And I have the honor to lead this office since the beginning of this year. So all of that is actually very, very new. The Office of Youth and Women, perhaps also to clarify, is leading FAO's work on advocating for youth and women and ensuring that they act as conduits both internally in FAO as well, supporting women and youth career enrichment for our employees. But perhaps more importantly, and that is where you come into play, externally by gathering novel ideas, approaches, policy priorities from youth and women on agri-food system transformation, including through the types of platforms like the World Food Forum's Global Youth Action Initiative and this important assembly, and through the Youth Policy Board. And this office is for you and at your service to support you in this important mission. In fact, as Dominique was saying also at the very beginning, it pointed out very strongly in his opening remarks, all of our actions are really based on the belief that youth are not only leaders of tomorrow, somehow far in the future or far in the distance, but truly leaders of today, as you are really leading such discussions, bringing the important perspectives that you have from different parts of the world to the forefront. And we help you in accessing the different governing bodies gradually to bring your voice really to bear. And we also are strong about the issue that youth are not just seen as beneficiaries. So we really don't want to talk about youth, but most importantly, with youth, and hope to increase the understanding amongst the membership that youth is a crucial provider of scalable solutions, that there are real policy solutions that can shape the future for our agri-food systems. In 2024, the Youth Assembly met quite a number of times virtually and then also in person, with more than 2,000 delegates from 150 countries. And last year's theme was Good Food for All, for today and tomorrow. And we focused on quite a number of things: learning, knowledge sharing, partnership building. And we were covering areas from forestry to fisheries to sustainable water management. And so really a lot of different issues, building climate resilient agri-food systems and so on. And many of these conversations led to youth statements, advocacy, actions, and so on, through the launch, in particular, of the Global Youth Action Plan 24-25. And that was launched last year at the World Food Forum flagship event in October. And this aims to turn policy recommendations into local, tangible actions for youth to impact truly on their communities. In 2024, we had a very exciting year. The Youth Assembly grew considerably, and this also was seen as a growth in the value that was increasingly given to the Youth Assembly in the different international agri-food spaces, and in particular in food governance bodies. And I'm truly looking forward to what is happening this year in 2025 with such structured approaches as are now have now started with this consultation in this year. And I'm sure that this is just the beginning. This is the first consultation. So I'm absolutely certain that this will be an extremely impactful year for the Youth Assembly. So in all of that, please be assured, FAO is fully committed, is at your side, fully committed to supporting initiatives that recognize the vital contributions youth make to agri-food systems. And we know that your voices sometimes are very much being undervalued. And we do see this as one of the biggest issues that we need to address, in particular in governing bodies around the UN system. And we have also heard some of that today. Our work aims to challenge discriminatory norms and increase access of youth to education, training, resources, and ultimately also your voices in governing bodies, in policy spaces, and of course, now linked to today's discussion, ultimately also to decent rural employment opportunities and so forth. In fact, there are currently 600 million young people residing in rural areas of developing countries, just to give you a bit also of the magnitude of what you are actually talking about in this assembly. And these 600 million young people represent about half of the global youth population aged between 15 and 25. And we have heard that today as well from the youth representative from the WTO. These young people are some of the most financially excluded and underserved segments of rural populations. So you have really chosen an extremely important topic here with this first assembly. And the vulnerability aspects that specifically characterize rural youth tend to intersect with a range of broader macroeconomic trends that are increasingly affecting rural areas in developing countries. And of course, they are accelerated by rising impacts from climate change to the rapid advances of agricultural technology and so on and so forth, just to mention a few. This situation is even worse, as you have been discussing today, for young rural women who, and that the World Bank data shows us, tend to be one of the most marginalized categories of actors in rural areas. So this is really a topic that you have been choosing, that you have been bringing to this forefront, and that we are now bringing to this to the different fora that is so central, so important, of such a magnitude in the world. And in fact, this is not only a barrier to individual progress of the individual person, but it holds back entire communities. It holds back, in fact, entire economies. So really an important topic that we have been listening to today. And we therefore must be determined to adequately address the specific needs of young women in particular, as emphasized by today's discussion. It's also crucial to adopt intersectional approaches, as we have also heard, this really helps us to better understand and address the unique opportunities and challenges that young women in particular face within the agri-food systems. I'm therefore pleased to see that you have chosen such intersectional approach, looking at SDG 2, Zero Hunger, SDG 5, Gender Equality, and SDG 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth, within the broader 2030 SDG agenda. I look forward on the basis of this to hear your calls to action and the continuation of this conversation. As you have seen at the beginning of this session, this consultation will continue, and Michaela has just shown you also the entire stream of different sessions that are ahead of us, including at the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women in March, the ECOSOC Youth Forum as well. Let's not forget about that. That's happening in April, and the High-Level Political Forum and so on, as well as, of course, also the World Food Forum in October. This year-long conversation also ties into the International Year of the Woman Farmer, which is going to happen next year in 2026. This is an international year of the General Assembly that is being implemented by FAO and partners throughout the year. And this conversation is going to be absolutely detrimental for this international year. And it is for sure also a further opportunity to recognize the crucial role of young women in ensuring food security, and of course for promoting the empowerment of women and girls in agriculture in general. So based on all of that, I invite you all to join us on this journey from Geneva today to New York, to Rome and beyond. And we will be, of course, at your side, committed to amplifying your voices, the youth voices, the voices of this important assembly in promoting youth-led solutions. And I'm happy to close today's session on this note and extend my thanks once again to the FAO Liaison Office in Geneva and the International Labour Organization for the collaboration in today's session. A thank you, a heartfelt thank you to all of the speakers, experts, and participants. Your contribution has made this event today really a true success, and I look forward to continuing our efforts and building the important discussions we have had today. Have a pleasant day, have a pleasant morning, have a pleasant evening, and a nice weekend. And I encourage you to engage with the Global Youth Action Initiative of the World Food Forum, in particular, of course, the Youth Assembly on the way forward. And I hope to see many of you in Rome, perhaps, or online at this year's World Food Forum flagship event, which is going to happen this October again. And with that, thank you, and back to you, Michaela, Marilena. I don't know who is going to do this closing.
Thank you so much, Kazuki. And I think there's nothing to add to those closing remarks. Thank you all for being here. Please stay engaged with us, and yeah, thank you for your participation.